Welcome to Cause and Career, shaping a new mindset for evolving workforce, a limited conversation series with active minds in the Hartford. The Hartford is a leader in property and casualty insurance, employee benefits, and mutual funds. With a shared focus on prevention and action, the Hartford and Active Minds are partnering to provide mental health support to young adults and mobilize the next generation of mental health advocates. Today, we have Anabel Cloutier-Perez from the Hartford to discuss making mental health a priority at work. With over 28 years of behavioral health clinical experience, Anabel is a licensed clinical social worker. She began her career working with patients with acute mental health conditions and later transitioned to trauma work. In 2006, her passion for mental health led her to the Hartford, where she started in the behavioral health unit and employee benefits. Today, she serves as the clinical manager of the Hartford's Behavioral Health Department, leading a large team of mental health clinicians who support U.S. workers protected by the Hartford's group disability and workers' compensation insurance. Annabelle, thank you so much for being here today. We are glad to have you.
Thank you for
So, to
having me.
Absolutely. Workplaces are critical pieces of our lives, seeing as the average person spends about one third of their life at work. For many, work provides a sense of meaning, value, and happiness, significantly impacting our overall well-being. Thus, creating healthy workplace environments is crucial to having a profound impact on individual and organization performance. The Hartford understands the need for mental health support at work is important to employees, especially within younger generations. According to the Hartford's Future Benefits Support Report, a stigma and barrier to support have a profound impact on workers' productivity. Thus, adapting to the changing needs and making a commitment to mental health is key when working towards employee satisfaction. So, Annabelle, we've already jumped in a little bit, telling us a little about your background and how you have been in the mental health space for quite some time. So, Annabelle, can you tell us how you have seen mental health in the workplace evolve over time?
Absolutely. Mental health in the workplace has a long history, definitely has evolved over time, and I think has now become a crucial piece of employee well being as well as productivity. I've seen an increased awareness for sure, a lot of conversations about mental health, stigma, and normalizing mental health, especially in the workplace. I think there's more of an emphasis now on employers supporting mental wellness at work. Companies are now offering mental health resources, promoting open conversations about mental health, and even implementing initiatives that foster a culture in the workplace that is psychologically safe and that supports that mental wellness in all of its aspects, right? Which includes and should include mental health. The Hartford conducts surveys every year. They're called our Future of Benefits studies. And this research has given us great information, particularly about this topic. In the study that we did in 2022, it revealed that one in three US workers felt anxious or depressed at least a few times a week. And that was up from the survey that we conducted in 2020. I think the data showed us that there's a growing mental health crisis and that creating space for mental health at work is certainly part of the solution. Like you said, we spend so much time at work. It needs to be part of the solution.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's unfortunate to hear that it is going up, but even more important to know that workplaces are starting to understand and provide space for it. So, can you tell us a little bit about how the Hartford has created a workplace committed to mental health?
As a person that specializes in mental health, and I've been in this field, as you said, a long time, I feel genuinely proud to work for a company that truly prioritizes mental health. Our chairman and CEO, Chris Swift, is a true advocate for mental health. He leads by example. He normalizes mental health for leaders, for employees in our company, and that helps to remove that stigma that is still attached to mental health. Chris has done things like, for example, the World Mental Health Day article, which was in partnership with the NAMI CEO, and that was on LinkedIn. He also did an article a while back with Milken's Institute, and that was the Power of Ideas Global Conference, and how the future of work depends on investing in mental health. Having our CEO lead the way in this space has been, like I said, an amazing experience for me being in the mental health space for so many years. We also have things that influence our workplace culture that has a mental health focus, things that reduce that stigma, that create that safe space for mental health. For example, we have 9 different employee resource groups or ERGs, and I personally find that those create a sense of community at work. And, it's a space where you can gather with other like-minded people. You create initiatives together. You create events together. You may have courageous conversations around topics that matter most to you. We also have what we call employee badges, and I like to call them badges of honor because they are in a way, right? So you can have a badge for different things. For example, you can get a badge if you have a certain competency or skill set, if you want to develop yourself in the company. But our ERGs have created badges that align with things like diversity and equity and belonging. And we have one of those badges that is dedicated to mental health. It's our mental health badge. So, in order to get that badge, you go through a series of courses and learning, and it creates an awareness, an understanding, and that becomes part of the culture as well, right? Like now people are buying into it, people are understanding it, and it helps to reduce, like I said, the stigma around it. We also partner with organizations like the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI. We partner with organizations like yours, Active Minds, all dedicated to promoting mental health, sharing knowledge, sharing awareness, bringing awareness to people, providing resources, things like that. So we have hosted events, we have sponsored events like the Active Minds send the Silence Packing, one of my favorites, that national tour, right? We've also created resources. We've created some resources, I know with you, with Active Minds, we've created some resources with NAMI to help employers and employees understand that there's a need to raise awareness, that, providing that awareness and sharing those types of resources is a way to support each other in the workspace. One of my favorite things is during Mental Health Awareness Month, which happens, that's in May. Our home office tower, we have our home office is in Hartford, Connecticut, and our tower building lights up in green. And that shows our support and again creates awareness and inspires people even in that community, right? Those people in that surrounding area can see that and what's that about, and they may look it up and understand that, oh, okay, it's they're doing that to highlight mental health awareness. But I think it especially inspires our own employees to learn more, to feel encouraged, to demonstrate behaviors that are in support of mental wellness. Employees are also encouraged to take the stigma-free workplace pledge during Mental Health Awareness Month. So all those things add up, right, and create that culture. I also mentioned our future of benefit studies, and this is research that makes mental health a priority by helping employers to think about the workplace mental health differently, to bring awareness to employees as well. I think we're also committed to mental health when it comes to our claimants. So people who have the Hartford as their disability insurance, and I'll explain that a little bit, right? Because some people may not be aware of how it all works, and it can get a bit complicated if you have never had or been on a leave, right? So say someone is working and they have anxiety or depression or any other mental illness condition or event. And it's gotten to the point where they can't work, right? They need to file for a short-term disability claim. So they take a leave from work for a short period of time. So we have a department at the Hartford that is dedicated to reviewing those files that come in with a mental health diagnosis. I have the honor and privilege of overseeing that department. And the people that work in this department that review these claims, they're all mental health clinicians like myself, right? So we even provide a space for them, for our customers to receive during that process, which can be sometimes one of the most difficult times in somebody's life, right? Empathy and
Absolutely.
compassion. Yeah, but also an understanding, right, that is unique to professionals in our field because we've done the work and we can understand and empathize with what that customer is going through now from that mental health standpoint. So I know I've mentioned several things, but I think all of it, right, has to do with that workplace culture, starting from Chris Swift and his efforts to do all the various things that he does, but also all the other things that I mentioned that really put a focus on mental health wellness and creating a workplace culture that feels, in my opinion, very safe from the mental health perspective.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. It's so important to understand the approach, right? So, like you said, it came from the leadership and then it translates into the culture of the employees and the experiences that you all have working in that environment. But then it also translates into the services that you provide to folks. So that way it is truly like a wraparound service, and it's not just one aspect to where it's like we can provide it for our employees but not necessarily in our business model and vice versa. And that's how you really
Right.
begin to understand that it's a true commitment. And I really appreciate hearing that. So in the along the same lines, what impact has creating a positive mental health work culture had on employees?
There's a relationship between mental health, productivity, company culture, and organizational performance. In I mentioned, right, I oversee that department that has mental health claims or claims that have a mental health diagnosis as what's causing the out of work scenario. And we know that mental health conditions are among the top 5 reasons why US workers cannot perform their jobs. Over the last few years, we've seen how employers are really trying and striving to help their workforce. They're doing more in the mental health space than before, but our studies also show that there continues to be a divide, right? There's a disconnect there. Employers think they're doing a great job of supporting mental health and creating open and inclusive environments, but close to half of US workers disagree. So as we focus on kind of the workforce of the future, right? Like the future of our work, this is a critical gap that employers need to address. When a company culture is one that fosters psychological safety, destigmatizes mental health or mental illness, we see firsthand how leaders from the C suites to frontline supervisors open up about mental health. And that inspires that stigma free culture. And it strengthens connections too within the company. Employee well-being, which, as I said, includes mental health, right? Like you can't have employee well-being without mental wellness as part of it. It influences the company's bottom line. When you have mental wellness at work, you increase job satisfaction, you increase employee engagement, you increase retention of your employees, and just overall work performance, right? Like you feel better and you're going to produce better. You're going to have better relationships with your coworkers. It's just the impact is kind of all around, right? So it's important for employers to be proactive and to help prevent mental health conditions from being a crisis that may lead to a disability claim.
Yeah, that is so important to understand like the proactive pieces of it.
Yeah.
I know when I like the place that I'm going, I'm going to show up my best, right? And like when you know that you have colleagues that you're working with and you don't want to let them down. So having that true connection and not necessarily always just like transactional, that really helps foster a different
Right.
environment as it relates to folks' mental health as well. So thank you so much for sharing. What are some examples of mental health supports available within the workplace?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I don't know that people always understand what benefits or what options they have, right? So the first one that comes to mind is EAP, employee assistance, right? Like people know what EAP is. They may even know what the acronym stands for, but I have found that people don't always know all the services that EAP brings to you, right? Like I think people equate EAP with counseling, and it does, right? Like you can
Mm,
receive counseling through EAP, you can have EAP give you resources for counseling, right? Like if you've exhausted your EAP sessions and you need, additional therapy, or you need to see a
mhm.
psychiatrist for medication, they can assist with that. But EAP is also legal resources and financial resources and work life stuff and even things like travel, right? So I always tell people, know who your EAP provider is, know what that phone number is, and maybe use it for something, right? Like maybe not something because you're going through a crisis and you may not need EAP counseling, but is there resources that you may need that EAP may help you with? Become familiar with making that call, with speaking to somebody. Become familiar with the resource that is attached to your employer from an EAP perspective. The other one is the benefits. And PTO is part of our benefits, right? Like, do you know what your company's policy is around PTO? Is it for just personal time off? Do you have sick days? Is there flexibility from your employer? Like, what's the policy around that? And I mention flexibility because sometimes that's what people need in the moment, right? Like they may need a little bit of flexibility to be able to attend their 1 hour telehealth therapy appointment once a week,
Right.
right? So maybe that flexibility would be, helpful. So it's understanding what the policies are. Benefits, like what are your company's benefits around, I mentioned short-term disability. What are the benefits that are available to you? And the other pieces is knowing what all those resources are before you're in crisis. When
Oh,
you're
that's
in
good.
crisis, that is not the time to find out what your resources are because you're not in the right space mentally, right? So if you learn what that is ahead of time, that is going to minimize that anxiety. It's going to minimize that crisis feeling, right? Because you know what your options are, or you know who you need to call or what that number is ahead of time. So that's for employees. I think for employers, one thing I would say is don't talk about benefits just once a year during open enrollment, right? Because
Yes.
people will inevitably put that kind of out of their minds, right? Because they don't need it in the moment. So it doesn't mean you have to talk about it every week or every month even, right? But is there a periodic kind of reminder to employees that these are your benefits and these are your physical benefits or these are your mental health benefits? A lot of companies now have apps as well, right? And that's an easy enough thing that you can download on your phone and you have that additional kind of mental health support as well. So it's knowing what all those benefits are, I think has, a big impact for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that because a lot of young folks, as they are entering into the workplace, they're like, benefits, what are these things? And there's so much information that is given to them, and they may only see it as one aspect. So I appreciate you sharing like the travel portion of it, the financial side, because all of those do contribute to a person's overall well being. So, on that same vein, you said not to wait until folks are in crises, which makes a lot of sense. But also, in that same vein, what are some of the signs that folks should be aware of to recognize it may be time to access the mental health resources?
Yeah, that's another great question, right? So I'll start with burnout because burnout has been a topic in the recent years because so many people are burnt out. And the research we conducted, I believe it was 2023, noted that 60% of US workers are burnt out, have some level of burnout. And burnout can sometimes be the first sign of a mental illness event, right? And if you leave it untreated, it can lead to things like depression or anxiety or post-traumatic stress disorder. But we know that burnout doesn't happen overnight, right? It's a progressive process, and there are signs along the way. And I'll give you an example. So, some of the questions to kind of ask yourself is things like, do you feel differently? If so, can you
Mm,
pinpoint what that is? Is it a feeling? Right? Is it a feeling that you're
right.
experiencing on a more frequent basis? Maybe it's something like frustration. Are you feeling more frustrated? Are you feeling angry? Are you feeling sadness? Are there behavioral changes that you've noticed? A lot of people will notice sleep, right? Like my sleep is interrupted, or I'm
Mhm.
getting trouble falling asleep. Are you more withdrawn? Maybe you used to really look forward to, having that interaction with your peers at work, but now not so much, right? There may be physical symptoms, headaches, stomach aches. You feel tired, you're unmotivated, right? How about your work performance? Has that changed? Is it worse? Are you falling behind? Are you feeling overwhelmed day after day? Is it impacting your personal life? That's another piece people notice, right? Like, I used to be able to handle it at work, but now it's bleeding into my personal life. So the important thing is that when you notice any of this, any change, right? Whether it's the
Mhm.
first signs of it, or maybe you're in a space where, gosh, this has been happening for a few weeks or even a few months, that you're not just trying to push through. Don't push through. Pushing through won't address it. Pushing through won't make you feel better. Things will only progress and get worse if you don't pay attention to it. So I would say get that therapist, call that EAP number, talk to a friend or that trusted person in your life. And hopefully you have a great relationship with your supervisor and can talk to them and figure out what those next steps might be. Like I mentioned earlier, it might just mean making a change in your day-to-day kind of desk management, right? Or having some flexibility if that's possible. Looking at your schedule or, allowing to leave early maybe once a week so you can attend your therapy session. Sometimes it's more, right? Sometimes you need something like an accommodation. The biggest and most important message, I think, is to share with people or to let people know you're not alone, right? Many,
So,
many people are feeling this way right now. It's a difficult world, right? It's a difficult world.
mhm.
There's a lot going on. We are overstimulated every single day. We have work and we have a lot of stimulus coming to us there, but there's also in our personal life, there's a lot of things going on as well, right? And there's no shame in feeling that way. This is how you're feeling, and it's just about getting the help that is out there. And I think many times it's just taking that first step, right? And maybe that first step is, like I said, just calling that number, right? And speaking to somebody who is trained to help you. or, having that conversation with that trusted adult in your life, but getting you to a future self that is going to be feeling so much better once you initiate that help.
Absolutely. I just love so much that you said don't push through. Because a lot of times when folks feel like we have so many things that we have to get done, and it's like, I just need to meet this deadline, or I just got to get there, that will continue to try to push and push and push. But it's at the sake of our own self. So I think that is such a really great point to highlight is don't push through, even when we have so many competing deadlines or things that's grabbing for our attention if we know that we're not operating as our best self. So, Annabelle, what advice would you give to someone who may be unsure or nervous about accessing mental health resources? I know you said the first step is to just do it, but like, how how do someone
Yeah.
work past that nervousness?
Yeah, and I want to normalize that because I think, and I'm not saying this is the case for everybody, but I feel new things are scary, right? Doesn't matter what it is. Something new can be scary,
Absolutely.
but it's especially scary, right? It's especially scary if that something is going to make you feel vulnerable. And this can make you feel vulnerable, right? Because you're opening up, you're sharing information that is very private about you and the way that you've been feeling, and that can feel scary. And when I would say when you're looking for mental health resources, and I mentioned some things already, right? Like calling EAP, those are people that are trained in this space that can help you and are going to normalize you going through this experience, right? Or speaking to somebody that you feel is safe. But I think when you're looking for a mental health resource, I would say look for people who are trained, that are credentialed, that have experience, right? And again, that EAP resource to me is a great resource, or maybe somebody in your human resources department can help connect you as well, right? Some leaders are trained in what we call mental health first aid, and they're ready with resources to give you, right?
Mhm.
So they may have resources that they can provide you as well. And they can help you find the right person. Nowadays, and since the pandemic, right, we've seen a shift in the availability of mental health resources, right? Like if you don't feel comfortable going in person, you have telehealth options. If you don't necessarily have insurance that is going to cover a big portion of your therapy session, some therapists will do sliding fee scales, right? So I guess my message is there is help out there. And once you establish care with someone and you have that safe, confidential space to go to every week or twice a week or every other week, whatever is determined is the right fit for you, you are going to have that safe space for you to talk about anything, right? No judgment, just a safe space to get things out. And most importantly, to learn how to cope with things maybe a little differently, right? Because I find that sometimes that is what is faulty. Is going to therapy going to change the world around us? Absolutely not. It's still going to be this, perhaps difficult world we're living in, overstimulated world we're living in, but it's going to give you skills to cope with things a little differently, and that can make all the difference.
Absolutely. That's so great. Just taking that first step and figuring out who may be the right person. And let's normalize taking that, right? And going to HR to understand your benefits more. And I tell young people this all the time, those are your benefits. Those are your PTO days. I also like that you said finding trusted folks, so mental health aid trained, but also I think for the Harvard inside of you all's culture, maybe seeing somebody with a mental health badge, being able to say, like, I see you have this
Exactly.
badge. How can I go? Like, how did you do this? Tell me a little bit more about it. And then that way you can work towards finding people. So, of course, train people who will be able to help through it, but opening up that door in that conversation with someone who is letting you know, I'm a trusted person to have this conversation to help you along your way as you get access. This has been such a fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today and telling us about how making mental health a priority at work really leads to a healthy workplace.
Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation, and I feel honored and privileged to be here and to be able to have this conversation and hopefully have some information that goes out to people that they can use.